In the year 1892, in a quiet riverside town called Eldermere, there lived a wealthy merchant named Jonathan Hale. His name was spoken with respect in marketplaces and council halls alike. He owned ships that crossed distant seas, warehouses filled with spices and silk, and a grand house that stood on the highest hill overlooking the town. From the outside, Jonathan Hale had everything a man could desire: wealth, influence, and admiration. Yet every morning, he woke with a heaviness in his chest. His servants noticed he rarely smiled. His meals were prepared with the finest ingredients, yet he ate without appetite. Musicians played in his drawing room during evening gatherings, but their melodies felt like distant echoes to him. Even when townspeople praised his success, Jonathan felt strangely empty, as though something essential was missing from his life. One cold autumn evening, as golden leaves drifted across the cobblestone streets, Jonathan decided to walk alone through the poorer quarter of Eldermere. It was not a place he often visited. The houses were small, the roads uneven, and the air carried the scent of burning wood instead of imported perfumes. As he passed by a narrow alley, he heard laughter. Curious, Jonathan slowed his steps. He saw an old cobbler named Samuel sitting outside his modest shop. Samuel's clothes were worn, his hands rough from years of labor. Beside him sat his young granddaughter, Clara. They shared a simple meal, just bread and a small bowl of soup. Yet their faces glowed with warmth as they spoke and laughed together. Clara told a story about her day at school, exaggerating her teacher's stern expressions, and Samuel chuckled heartily, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. There was no silverware, no grand table, no expensive wine, only presence, affection, and contentment. Jonathan stood frozen. He had dined with governors and traveled across oceans, yet he could not remember the last time he laughed so freely. He had built an empire from nothing, yet this old cobbler, who owned almost nothing, seemed richer in spirit than he could ever imagine. The next evening, Jonathan returned. This time, he approached Samuel directly. "Tell me," Jonathan asked, trying to hide the restlessness in his voice, "how can you be so joyful with so little?" Samuel looked at him calmly, his wise eyes reflecting years of quiet understanding. "With so little?" he repeated gently. "Sir, I have enough bread for today, work for my hands, and love beside me. What more should a man demand from life?" Jonathan had no answer. That night, he returned to his mansion, but the silence felt louder than ever before. He walked through his vast halls, touched the polished wooden tables, and stared at the portraits on the walls. For the first time, he wondered whether he had spent his entire life chasing the wrong treasure. And for the first time in many years, he could not sleep, not because of business worries, but because a simple question echoed in his mind. What if true happiness was never about having more, but about needing less? The question refused to leave Jonathan's mind. For days, it followed him into business meetings and echoed through the quiet corridors of his home. Contracts were signed, shipments were approved, profits increased. Yet none of it stirred excitement within him anymore. The numbers felt hollow, like coins clinking in an empty chest. One afternoon, instead of heading to the harbor to inspect his newest vessel, Jonathan walked once again toward Samuel's small cobbler shop. This time, he did not stand at a distance. "May I sit?" Jonathan asked. Samuel smiled and moved a wooden stool closer. "Of course, sir." Jonathan removed his fine gloves and looked at the worn leather shoes Samuel was repairing. The old man worked slowly but carefully, each stitch deliberate, each movement patient. "You have worked here your whole life?" Jonathan asked. "Nearly 40 years," Samuel replied. "These hands know every tear and every thread. And you never wished for more? A bigger shop? Greater wealth?" Samuel paused and glanced at Clara, who was drawing shapes in the dust nearby. "When I was young, I wished for many things," he admitted. "But I learned something. The more I desired beyond my needs, the more restless my heart became. So I asked myself, what truly matters?" Jonathan listened closely. "I need enough to eat," Samuel continued. "I need honest work so I may sleep peacefully at night. And I need love, someone to share stories with when the day is done. Everything else is decoration. The words struck Jonathan deeply. Decoration. He thought of his grand dining hall with its crystal chandeliers. Decoration. He thought of the expensive paintings imported from distant lands. Decoration. He thought of the endless race to expand his trade routes. Decoration. That evening, Jonathan did something unusual. He canceled a lavish dinner gathering he had planned for influential guests. Instead, he instructed his staff to prepare simple meals and send them quietly to several struggling families in the poorer district. No announcements, no recognition, no public praise. For the first time, Jonathan felt something stir inside him. Not pride, not superiority, but a quiet warmth. It was subtle yet powerful. The next day, he returned to Samuel with a thoughtful expression. "I tried something different," Jonathan said. "I gave without expecting anything in return." Samuel nodded knowingly. "And how did it feel?" Jonathan hesitated, searching for the right word. "Light," he finally said. "It felt light." Samuel chuckled softly. Because generosity removes weight from the soul. Over the following weeks, Jonathan began simplifying his life. He reduced unnecessary business expansions. He spent more time walking through the town instead of hiding behind carriage curtains. He listened to people, not as a merchant seeking opportunity, but as a man seeking connection. Yet even as changes unfolded, Jonathan sensed that he was only beginning to understand the true secret behind happiness. He realized happiness was not a sudden treasure to be discovered. It was a practice, a discipline of gratitude, a choice made daily. But there was still one lesson left for him to learn. One final truth that would transform not just his actions, but his heart. And that lesson would come sooner than he expected. Winter came to Eldermere and Samuel fell ill. Jonathan found the shop closed and neighbors waiting outside. His heart sank. Without thinking, he arranged a physician and care, visiting every day and sitting beside the old cobbler's bed. Clara held Samuel's hand. One night, Samuel smiled faintly and told Jonathan he looked different. Not because of him, but because he had stopped chasing wealth and started appreciating life. Jonathan realized happiness was not in possessions but in gratitude and giving. He had spent years collecting riches yet felt empty. Now, helping others and valuing simple connections brought peace. After Samuel's passing, Jonathan continued supporting schools and struggling families, quietly funding change without seeking recognition. His mansion remained grand, but it no longer controlled him. He worked less for status and more for purpose. He understood the secret of happiness. True richness comes from love, service, and meaningful relationships. For the first time, he felt content and truly free. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe my channel.